Hi, it's Mr. Brough here. I just would like to talk you through this 12-mark exam question that we're going to do. I think if I talk you through it, it'll help a little bit. So the question is, why did Hitler launch the Munich Putsch in 1923? And what that means is, why did Hitler in 1923 decide that him and members of the Nazi Party, members of the SA, were going to overthrow the democratically elected Weimar government and replace them with a dictatorship with Hitler as the person in charge? So that's what the question means, and what we are expected to do is write 3 paragraphs that explain that, and what we're aiming for really is to try and link the paragraphs as best we can. So that's what we're going to do, okay? So I'm going to talk you through the reasons. If you want to pause at any point and make some notes, you can. You don't really need to, because some of the earlier lessons that we've done with this 4-lesson set you'll have made notes already. So at the end of World War One, politicians such as Ebert had signed the armistice, where Germany had agreed to stop fighting, and the same politicians had then in 1919 signed the Treaty of Versailles, where Germany was very, very harshly treated. And many Germans were outraged that their own politicians could have done this, because it was seen as a betrayal and it was seen as a surrender. Many Germans didn't understand how weak Germany were by the end of 1918. So you get something called the Dolchstoß myth, or the stabbed in the back myth. This idea that the politicians such as Ebert, who were Democrats, who were part of the Weimar Republic, that they had stabbed Germany in the back. They had betrayed Germany. And so these people are sometimes referred to as the November criminals. So one reason why Hitler looked to take power, I suppose, was to kind of avenge the betrayal that the November criminals had imposed on Germany, and he wanted to restore Germany's pride. So that was one of the reasons why, one of the long-term reasons why Hitler decided to launch the revolution, launch the Putsch in November 1923. Alright, now the next 2 reasons are slightly more complicated, and we haven't actually studied these yet, but there's loads of information on YouTube that you could have a look, and I'll talk you through now. So, with the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forced to pay £6.6 billion in reparations, in compensation to the Allies for the damage that they'd done during World War One. And Germany didn't have that money. The Germans tried to make one payment, and then they stopped making the payments in 1921 and 1922. What then happened is that the French and the Belgians invaded the industrial area of Germany, the Ruhr, R-U-H-R, to take over the German industry so that they could recoup the costs that they were owed from the Germans by taking over the industry. Now, what then happened is, because the Germans didn't have an army, they only had 100,000 soldiers, the German government encouraged the people in the Ruhr to engage in what was called passive resistance. So they essentially went on strike. They wouldn't cooperate with the French or Belgians. They wouldn't acknowledge they existed. They ignored them. So in the Ruhr region of Germany, the economy ground to a halt. There was violence. Some Germans were killed by the French and the Belgians. And then what happened is, the German government, it still needed to buy coal from abroad because it wasn't producing any, and it needed to pay its workers, but it wasn't making any goods that it could sell to get the money. So what the German government did is it printed money. It printed lots of money to pay for the coal, to pay for the German workers. And the problem with that is, industrial output had fallen by 80%. So there was basically too much money chasing too few goods. Now imagine it, all the teachers in Britain, if suddenly their wages were doubled, which is not going to happen under a Conservative government, then the cost of things in this country would increase because there'd be more money chasing goods. What happened in Germany was something far, far worse. It was called hyperinflation. So there was way too much money chasing way too few goods, and the cost of things spiraled to insane levels. So a loaf of bread might cost 200 billion Deutschmarks. Money became worthless. Money was carried around in wheelbarrows. There were stories of people taking wheelbarrows of money to shops to buy things. When they came out, the money was there, but the wheelbarrow has been stolen. So this was hyperinflation. And what it did is it destroyed the savings of the German middle classes. It destroyed pensions, so ex-soldiers living on pensions and old-age pensioners living on pensions, their money became worthless. And so people all of a sudden, in a modern industrial country, found that money didn't work. And this was a huge government disaster, and it made life incredibly difficult for people. And hyperinflation was a short-term reason why Hitler decided to take over the government, because him and his supporters were absolutely outraged that a government could behave so incompetently and put so many ordinary Germans in this position. So it inspired Hitler to try and take control of the government to sort this situation out. So, in late autumn, winter of 1923, Germany was suffering terribly from hyperinflation. Money had become worthless. An egg would cost billions of Deutschmarks. And the German Chancellor, the German Prime Minister, Gustav Stresemann, who was a very clever and competent politician, he understood that if Germany's economy was to get sorted out, then Germany needed to stop the thing that had caused hyperinflation. And the thing that had caused hyperinflation was passive resistance, because the government had printed money to pay for workers who weren't working, and industrial output had fallen by 80%. And so there was far too much money chasing far too little goods. So on the 26th of September 1923, Gustav Stresemann made the decision to stop passive resistance and to discuss how Germany would restart paying its reparations to the Allies. And Stresemann did the right thing economically, because it was the only way to restore Germany's economy. However, his actions were incredibly unpopular. He basically didn't last as Chancellor after this. A lot of Germans, including Hitler, saw Stresemann's actions as, again, a betrayal of Germany, and Hitler accused Stresemann of cowardice in doing what he was doing. And this connects back to the Dolchstoss theory, the stabbed in the back theory. And for Hitler, this was probably the final straw, actually. So you may definitely want this in your answer. I think 2 days after Stresemann cancelled passive resistance, Hitler and other leading Nazis met and made the decision that they were going to overthrow the government. And so there is a direct connection there that Hitler decided to overthrow the government in response to Stresemann ending passive resistance, because Hitler was of the opinion, as many Germans were, that Stresemann had again betrayed Germany. So Hitler wanted to get rid of the government that had betrayed Germany on at least 3 occasions and set up his own government. Now, a second possible long-term reason for why Hitler decided in November 1923 to try and take over the German government is because Benito Mussolini had done it the previous year in Italy. Benito Mussolini was an ex-soldier, a bit like Hitler. He'd fought in the Italian army. A bit like Hitler, he was a very brave soldier. And in 1922, Benito Mussolini and his Italian fascists had marched on Rome, and they had forced the Prime Minister to resign, and they'd forced the King to accept Mussolini as the dictator, as the main leader of Italy. And so, obviously, Hitler was extremely influenced by this. He saw what Mussolini had achieved, and he was inspired to try and achieve the same things with the same results in Germany. And again, that is a long-term reason why Hitler took those actions. So this question is all about testing your skills of explanation, of saying why something happened. So this question, it will give you suggestions of paragraphs, but ultimately this question is saying to you, write 3 paragraphs that individually explain why Hitler decided to overthrow a democratic government, why he decided to commit treason in November of 1923. And you're expected to do it in 3 paragraphs, focusing on 3 factors. You don't need a conclusion, okay? And you need your explanations to be supported by precise historical facts. So that's what we are aiming to do here. And there are different ways that you can do this. So I'm going to talk you through a couple. So one possible way is you could look at a couple of factors that are connected and are long-term factors. So you could first of all look at the stabbed in the back theory, which is a long-term political factor. And then you could maybe look at Mussolini, which is somewhere between a long and a medium-term political factor. Those could be your first 2 paragraphs. Now, if you're starting each paragraph with a long-term political reason, and then your next paragraph a medium-term political reason, you're linking the factors because you're saying they're the same kind of factors. So you could say, one way you could do it is you could do paragraph 1, stabbed in the back, paragraph 2, Mussolini, paragraph 3, you could then say a short-term economic cause of the putsch was hyperinflation. Okay, and then what you would do, that's your essay, those are your 3 paragraphs. For your 3 individual paragraphs, a description of what each factor is, so some precise facts, and then an explanation of why this led Hitler to launch a putsch. And this is where those little connectives, those 3-word connectives, as a result, this led to, because of this, that's where you deploy these. So you'd maybe first of all describe the stabbed in the back theory and then say, as a result of this, and then explain the action that Hitler took. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. A different way of doing it, you could have a long-term political cause, being the stabbed in the back myth. You could have a short-term economic cause, which is hyperinflation, and then your 3rd paragraph, a short-term political cause, Stresemann calling off passive resistance. And you can see connections there. Okay, so you've got a long-term political cause, a short-term political cause, so you've identified that they're similar, and then you've got a short-term economic cause. When you're using these phrases, long-term political cause, short-term political cause, at the start of sentences, at the start of paragraphs, you are linking the different paragraphs, and that's how you do it. So say you went from your 2nd paragraph talking about hyperinflation, you would say, as a result of hyperinflation, there was a short-term political reason why Hitler launched the putsch, and that was how Stresemann tried to solve the problem of hyperinflation. And again, you do it in the same way. So for each of the 3 paragraphs, describe that factor, some precise details, and then explain how that led to Hitler's actions. So if it was a paragraph on cancelling passive resistance, put in the name Stresemann, 26th of September 1923, decided to call off passive resistance, and then your explanation. As a result of this, Hitler and his supporters felt that Germany was being betrayed again, and therefore decided to launch the revolt. Okay, so that's how you can organise it. The examiners just want you to write 3 paragraphs, and ideally connect them, explaining why this action took place. They don't really care which 3 factors you choose, and you don't have to use the factors that are mentioned in the question. They're just to help you. The only thing you must do if you want to get top marks is write 3 paragraphs that explain. Okie dokie, so have a go at this 12-mark question. If you're not sure about anything, you're more than welcome to email me, and I'll try and give you an answer. It needs to be uploaded by midday on Monday the 18th of May. Okay, please don't upload it through Bloodle. Ideally, use Microsoft Teams, and I know many of you have used that. If you cannot use Microsoft Teams, please just email me your answer, okay? For me, the best way is for you to have typed the answer on a Word document and then send me the Word document. The second best is for you to handwrite your answer, photograph it, and then copy and paste the photographs onto Word documents. Anything that is not a Word document makes my life tremendously difficult, and it's actually really hard to mark it. Okay, so if you could get all of that done by Monday the 18th of May, that would be great. I would also appreciate some feedback on these clips, if that's okay. I've used them with my Year 12s, and I think it will help you if I am talking you through this, but you need to let me know. Okay, good luck and stay safe, everyone. Thanks a lot.